So, what are the worst Darkmoon Faire cards? Gonna try to answer that question in this video. Because, despite all this talk about Hearthstone power creep, there are still some stinkers released in new expansions. And the three behind me aren't very good, but they're not even on this list. These aren't bad enough to be in the bottom 10. These are better than the worst cards in Darkmoon Faire, and these cards are not particularly good. So we have some real bad cards in this video. Not all of them will be surprises. Some of them I think we expected to be bad, but there will be some that are rather shocking, I think, for being so terrible. That said, before we jump into the list, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this video. It's the Opera GX browser. The Opera GX browser is the first one designed for gamers. So for instance, it has cool features like GX control, where you can limit the amount of resources your browser's using. You got 50 Regis Kilbin video tabs open. You can make sure you're not using too much RAM, limit your CPU, maybe even limit your network. You've also got the GX Corner, which showcases upcoming game releases, including a really handy feature here that spotlights new free games, so you can keep an eye on things you can get and play for free, along with exciting releases, deals, discounts, news, and so on. There's also Twitch and Discord integration. Hop over to Twitch, see that I'm live, click in. We got Dog and Hafu live right now. You've also got Discord, so you can join the Regis Kilbin Discord and keep an eye on all the latest comments right here in your browser. GX Browser also has some great customization tools. I know everybody's all about RGB when it comes to their PCs. You got a purple theme PC, boom, GX Browser falls right in line. So you can check out these features and more, like GX Cleaner to keep an eye on your cookies and tabs and cache really easily. Maybe you want to check out some extensions like an ad blocker. All those options exist in the GX Browser, which you can download using the link in the description and the pinned comment below right now. If you do download it, I want to know just how many Regis Kilbin tabs you have open right now. So now that you have a new browser to watch this video and future videos, let's go ahead and jump into the bottom 10 here. Starting off with our first legendary in the video, it's Grand Empress Shek'zara. Now, I'm going to come clean right now. I biased this list a little bit to include a couple legendaries that are really probably in the 16th to 20th worst range as far as cards are concerned. But I had this argument that I at least talked myself into, that legendaries should be better than normal cards. So a legendary in the bottom 20 should probably still be recognized as one of the absolute worst cards in the expansion, because it's a legendary. Somebody's going to open this in a pack, and the fact that it's bad is really disastrous, because you're losing so much dust when you get a bad legendary as compared to a good legendary. So, in an effort to recognize how awful of an experience that is, and maybe hint that legendaries should be notably cheaper or more efficient to disenchant, I'm including some legendaries in this video. And as you can see, Shek'zara here, coming in with win rates around the 45% mark. There isn't a deck that's really found a home for Shek'zara, because Rogue is really right now just playing faster and quicker. And cards at the 6 mana slot right now are just hard to run in Rogue. They're typically topping out at 5 mana with things like Jandis, but most of their deck being played in that 2 to 3 mana or less slot. And despite that, they're still generating tons of value and finding a lot of things to do even into the late game. They don't need things like 6 mana cards like Shek'zara to make their game plan work. And this card, I think, it has this specific utility where it can help you find this one key thing you care about, or maybe stuff you've shuffled into your deck, like some scary teddy bears. There's plays for Shek'zara that make sense. So I'm not saying this card's going to be terrible forever. There could definitely be a rogue deck in the future that needs that specific finding something in your deck tool that Shek'zara offers, and maybe they play a little bit slower and Shek'zara slots in a little better than it does right now. But at the moment, rogues just don't need a tool like this. They have way better decks doing very well without a card like this one. This just doesn't increment that game plan at all. So it falls short, and it falls into decks where people try to make it work, and it doesn't work, and that leaves its win rate in a pretty dire position. So next up, we have a pretty similar card here, another legendary in Greybough for Druid. And you can see here, this one's really disastrous when you try to get a deck utilizing Greybough. He has a 41% win rate across the expansion right now for decks running Greybough. His drawn win rate's a little higher, so he is one of the better components of those decks, it would seem. But you have to find him to support a Greybough deck, which means if you don't draw that one single legendary, your Greybough deck's definitely going to fail. And, you know, we've had some fun with this card, some memes and shenanigans, but I get it. He's really awkward to use. Not only is he susceptible to those, you know, silences and hexes, which don't inherently make a card weak, they don't help. And beyond that, you have to get these kind of perfectly aligned board states or really intricate setups for this card to take off and become that overwhelming force that just keeps repeating a taunt and a taunt and a taunt and a taunt. And because the meta has ways to ignore that, and because it's just so inconsistent in and of itself, Greybough falls really far short. And what all that means is I think you have here the second worst legendary for win rates in the entire expansion. So next up here is the Showstopper. And this is where we get into some of the more like, wait, this card exists? I forgot about this one already. This is that little 2-mana 3/2 Death Rattle. It silences all minions. As you can see here, not working particularly well. No decks in the meta are running this successfully. And that's really because I think this Death Rattle is awkward in the fact that it's on a delay because it's a death rattle. Nobody's really activating this. Like, yes, theoretically, if you got this to go off, if it lived on board and you could kind of decide when to trade it in at the right time, like, yeah, it could have some upside. But those scenarios just don't exist. And they're so unlikely to succeed that you'd rather run some other 2-drop. There's just a lot of opportunity cost baked into a card like this one because it's only going to work a very tiny fraction of the time in these perfect scenarios. Yes, its output is high when it does, but that's so rare that you run other things instead, so no decks right now are able to run this one. You could envision some world where if there's, you know, a big taunt meta with Greyboughs or those Void Lord style cards we used to see in the past, maybe an aggro deck could toss a couple of these in just to have a nice big 2-drop that helps them find another way to beat those things. But most control decks that would run those big taunts could just kill this before developing those threats anyway. So just it seems like it's going to be kind of awkward forever as far as I'm concerned. I don't think we'll see the win rates on this one materially change in the future. So next up here, this is probably the most surprising card on this list for me. Maybe there's another one if I think about it. But regardless, pretty surprised by Fortune Teller. Only a 41% deck win rate, slightly better drawn win rates, but still pretty terrible. And, you know, I thought, hey man, Priest got this like spell package. Priest has really full hands. What that means is this is going to be like, you know, often a big 6/6, 7/7, 8/8 taunt for 5 mana. And that could be a cool way to slow down some aggressive decks or maybe create some counter pressure with a big mid-game body. Turns out it really hasn't been that successful at all. Even though there are a lot of Priest decks running a lot of spells, this just isn't a tool that's good enough to help them out. I think that's really just because right now in the Hearthstone world, investing into one big threat, it's so easily removed by a variety of things, whether that's just a blade dance from a demon hunter or, you know, a Zephyrus into a Shadow Word Death or Shadow Word Death itself. One big minion just doesn't really go that far as much anymore. You need bigger swings, bigger board impacts. You know, think about like Evolve Shaman. It's playing 5 giant things at once, not just one giant thing. And that's how Hearthstone works today. You know, Demon Hunter's getting a 1-mana 6/6 with Rush. A 5-mana 6/6 taunt isn't really all that exciting in the scheme of what other classes and decks are able to do. So I think that's why Fortune Teller's fallen short. Plus, as like a res style card, which Priest likes in some cases, it only gets res as a 3/3. That's not that exciting. There's no real mech synergies here. So all in all, it's just not quite good enough. I don't think it's inherently bad or, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just doesn't make the cut. Other cards do better things. Decks find more refined strategies, and cards like this just fall to the wayside. Moving on here to Cloak of Shadows, another rogue card. This was the little pseudo ice block or timeout, as it was described in many cases. 3 mana, like maybe keep yourself alive for an extra turn. And I think people were pretty high on this card as far as thinking it was going to be pretty solid. Turns out the win rates for it are terrible. Its drawn win rate's actually worse than its deck win rate, which means it's actually pretty bad, even in, you know, slightly better decks. it's pulling the win rate down. It's not helping at all, unlike some of the cards, which is not a good sign at all. And the reality here is for Rogue, buying one extra turn really doesn't usually change things too much for Rogue game plans right now. They don't have something like a big OTK they're trying to pull off, a big combo where they need that extra time, like Timeout or Ice Block historically worked well. Those were in decks that were looking for burn damage or a big OTK. They needed one extra turn to find it. Rogue's not doing that right now, so Cloak of Shadows doesn't make sense. Also, the aspect that it gives you stealth here is less good than Timeout or Ice Block both, because some things can still kill you through stealth. If your opponent has Arcane Missiles, sorry, buddy, you might still die. And, I have Cthunes out there a fair bit in the meta, so there are a handful of ways to kill you through this, which is still a significant downside as well. So all in all, no home for this one. Some problems compared to cards of the past that did similar things, which means right now Cloak of Shadows pretty bad. I think there's still a chance that a combo rogue pops up somewhere in the future and this card gets saved. I could see it getting play. It's going to be unlikely, but it's got that same potential and utility as those cards of the past, or at least similar potential. So keep an eye on it. Moving on here to our final legendary of the video, it's Deck of Chaos for Warlock, and man, this card's really fun. I would love this card to be good, but as you can see from the numbers, it is absolutely terrible. Decks built around Deck of Chaos absolutely falter, even though they're designed to support it. When you draw this, which is really the point where it's supposed to be good, is when you draw it, right? Because you're running a bunch of like suboptimal cards. You draw it, Deck of Chaos enables your deck. It's supposed to be a home run. You could envision a world where this is like a 35% deck win rate and a 50% drawn win rate, because you get it and your deck is suddenly, super empowered. Even when you hit it, it's still not that good. And the reason is you have to spend 6 mana to play your Deck of Chaos. And that's a really big tax to pay to get this upside from Deck of Chaos. So even when you draw it, it still isn't good enough. It doesn't get there. It's just too punishing. You're compromising the integrity of your deck when you don't have it. So, building around it's really tough and, makes you much, much weaker on average. So all in all, a bit of a failure here from a competitive standpoint. I mean, I guess it's possible we get some just crazy cards for it in the future, but I don't think that's that likely. This one's probably doomed to poor win rates forever, but people like me are still going to have fun playing it because it's a fantastic meme card. Moving on here to Feat of Strength, the Warrior Taunt hand buff card. Coming in under 40% win rates here. And man, I really want this one to work. We've had so much fun with Taunt hand buff stuff in the past, and this is one of the most efficient, I'd say, Taunt hand buffs we've seen. It's specific to taunts, which can be handy. It's 5/5 for 3 mana, which is pretty efficient, but it has the same problem all hand buff cards have. They're just too slow. And bringing back that sort of fortune teller argument, really investing into a singular large minion isn't as good in Hearthstone as it used to be. There's just way too many ways to answer these sorts of things. You don't want to have to spend all that mana, wait to utilize the upside of the mana, and then just dump that giant minion, and then it gets killed super duper easily. We've been goofing off trying to get stuff to 30/30, even dropping like a 20/20 minion that's been Feat of Strength. It still dies every single time I play it. And that's a kind of ridiculous exaggeration of the problem, but the same problem exists when it's just, an 8/8 minion as well or whatever. It's still an issue for Feat of Strength. So I don't see this card really ever making much of an impact. I think hand buff in general is just too awkward without like charge or magnetic or maybe rush to make an impact. I don't think taunt is the keyword that really supports this nicely. So because of that combination, Feat of Strength is probably never going to get there. Moving on to Optimistic Ogre. He may be optimistic, but he is not very good. And I don't think I can be optimistic about his chances in the future either. I don't think he'll ever be very good. The stat upside here is just so incredibly minimal as a 6/7 that the downside that he's attacking the wrong thing is absolutely just far, far too punishing. This is one of those cards that's like an arena card, a filler card, a throwaway card, of which the next few will probably be. And I just don't see a world where Optimistic Ogre ever gets there. I mean, I hope there's like some Ogre Battlegrounds tribe eventually. I think that'd be really sick to see in Battlegrounds, and maybe this could get tossed in that world as like a tier 3, tier 4 minion or something. But as it stands right now in constructed Hearthstone, there's no way this card ever makes sense. So moving on here to the second worst card, it's the Rock Rager. Look at those win rates, 32 and 34%, and things still get worse, believe it or not. I'm actually a little bit surprised how bad this one is. Because you look at it numerically, and it's actually not terrible numerically, right? You're getting 6 total stats for 2 mana. That's above vanilla. It's got a tribe and elemental, and it's got a keyword with taunt. If you reshuffled the numbers here, this card would be completely OP broken. Like, if this was a 2/4 elemental with taunt, that'd be really, really strong, right? I mean, well, actually, no, probably technically not still very strong because I don't know how elementals would use it. But you can envision some worlds where that could work pretty nicely for it. Instead, you've got a 1 health minion that's just dead to everything. There's too many lackeys, there's too many pings, there's too many wraths. Whatever it is, Rock Rager is just dying far too easily. The elemental synergies don't matter. I thought this might pop successfully into like a 1 health paladin build as well. That hasn't really gotten off the ground. So what that means is Rock Rager just doesn't have a home, and he's a really big liability to put into any given deck. The only decks playing him are probably total memes or auto-completes or who knows what, somebody who doesn't have any cards. So his win rates show up as being really, really terrible. And that's a little bit sad because I kind of want to root for the Rock Rager. And then finally here, our absolute worst card from Darkmoon Faire. It's the Kathir Ritualist. I'm sure you forgot this one existed already. Pretty forgettable card across the board. Win rates 25 and 28%. I think the idea here was, hey, a 4/4 for 3 mana, that's not too bad. It's got taunt, that's not too bad. Maybe some deck can figure this out. Giving your opponent a random 4-drop is not a huge downside theoretically. Like, most decks don't really need a random 4-drop. The problem is it does give them an on-curve play very often. If you play this on 3, your opponent goes into either their turn 3 with coin or their natural turn 4, and they've got something to do. So it's like maybe they didn't have anything to do instead. They were just going to hero power, and you fixed their curve. And you got very little upside for it. And, again, like, yes, this is better than vanilla stats, but who cares about vanilla Hearthstone these days? I mean, the things we're doing on turn 3 and turn 4 are just so obscene that a card like Kathir Ritualist doesn't even begin to keep up with the absurdity that's being unleashed in Hearthstone. So yeah, of course, this card solves problems for your opponent. It has very minimal upside. It's very forgettable from a flavor standpoint as well. I mean, this card deserves the moniker of being the very worst card in Darkmoon Faire.